I didn't expect to feel a flicker of irritation this morning, not with my schedule packed and my coffee steaming in my favorite mug. Yet when my phone buzzed on the glass table, I saw the name and froze. It was him, Mark, the guy who once laughed at my ridiculous ideas in that stuffy meeting back in Chicago. I smoothed the silk of my blouse, feeling the delicate fabric shift under my fingers, and stared out the floor-to-ceiling window at the skyline. Everything looked so calm from up here, the city moving in perfect rhythm below, while my pulse ticked a little faster. My office smelled faintly of lavender from the candle I'd lit earlier, a tiny comfort I allowed myself after long days of grinding unseen. Mark's text was simple. "Still doing that freelance stuff? Heard you weren't making much." A chuckle escaped me, bitter, soft. The audacity. The memory of him leaning back, arms crossed, smirking as if my ambition was nothing more than a joke, flared in my mind. And yet, beneath that old wound, I felt a spark of pride. I'd come a long way since those days. I took a slow breath, tracing the rim of my coffee cup, feeling the warmth seep into my palms. I could reply, "I've grown since then," or I could just let the truth speak when the time was right. Either way, something had shifted. The girl who once doubted herself was gone, and the woman who now built empires quietly, skill by skill, was ready to meet the past head-on. I remember that cramped office in Chicago like it was yesterday, the fluorescent lights flickering above, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the corner, and the way my hands trembled as I clutched my portfolio. I was 25, fresh out of grad school, full of ideas that felt revolutionary to me, but apparently laughable to everyone else. Mark and his clique had gathered around the conference table, their laughter bouncing off the sterile walls. "You really think that will work?" he had said, voice dripping with condescension. "You're ambitious, I'll give you that, but let's be realistic." The lump in my throat was sharp. My voice caught when I tried to defend my concepts, shaking just enough to betray my fear. I glanced down at my grandmother's silver bracelet, the one she had given me the summer I turned 18. "Remember, Lena," she'd said, her voice gentle but firm, "people will doubt your vision, but never let them dictate your worth. Your hands are capable of building more than they can imagine." I twisted it around my wrist, feeling its smooth weight like a lifeline, grounding me. Her words echoed as I made my choice that day. I left the office before the meeting ended, letting the murmurs and rolled eyes fade behind me. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply stepped out, each footfall solid, carrying a mix of anger and determination. That walk through the crowded streets, past the honking cabs and chattering pedestrians, felt like the first real step toward claiming a life I would own entirely on my terms. Later that night, sitting on my small apartment balcony with the city lights twinkling below, I made a promise to myself. I would prove them wrong, not for revenge, but to honor my potential. Every doubt, every smirk, every whispered dismissal became fuel. I was no longer just a girl with ideas. I was a woman determined to master her craft, quietly, relentlessly, until the world could not ignore her. And so began the long, winding path of building something that was entirely mine, a journey I vowed to keep hidden until the moment it mattered most. The first step toward building my life started in the quiet corners of my tiny apartment, late at night, with a laptop perched on the edge of a cluttered desk and a cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago. I devoured books on strategy, design, and leadership, scribbling notes in a worn journal that smelled faintly of lavender and ink. Every failure I encountered became a lesson, every small one a spark to keep going. Then came Julia, a seasoned project manager I met through a networking event. She was the kind of woman who commanded respect without raising her voice, her presence steady and warm. She looked at my work, not with skepticism, but with curiosity. "You've got raw talent," she told me one evening as we reviewed a prototype together. "But raw talent without guidance is like a fire without oxygen. You need structure, vision, and persistence. I can help with the rest." That mentorship became my anchor. I worked relentlessly, juggling freelance clients, part-time gigs, and online courses. Nights blurred into mornings as I taught myself coding languages, marketing strategies, and the nuances of negotiation. The doubts were relentless too, the quiet voice that whispered, "Are you enough?" But I clutched my grandmother's bracelet whenever the fear crept in, and it reminded me that capability was born from persistence, not validation. My first big client was a boutique marketing firm looking for someone innovative, though I suspected they just didn't want the conventional. The project was grueling, and I made mistakes, but I also learned quickly. When the campaign launched and exceeded expectations, I felt the first taste of independence, the power of seeing my skills create tangible results. Each subsequent project added layers of confidence and skill. My reputation began to grow quietly, word of mouth spreading, though I kept my family in the dark about the details. I found joy in these small victories. The first profitable contract, the first time a client trusted me with their entire vision, the subtle thrill of realizing that my hard work could sustain me entirely. I celebrated silently, a glass of wine on the balcony, the city lights glittering beneath me, and the soft hum of my favorite playlist in the background. These moments, though private, were intensely fulfilling. I also learned to navigate skepticism gracefully. Former colleagues, even friends, sometimes brushed off my progress, assuming I was still figuring things out. I let them underestimate me. It became a quiet game, one in which I honed not just my professional skills, but the art of patience, strategy, and composure. By the time I was 30, I had built a portfolio that rivaled firms twice my size. I had a small team, a growing client base, and the ability to make executive decisions that directly influenced outcomes. And yet, I maintained my secret, nurturing my empire quietly, ready for the moment when the people who once mocked my abilities would finally meet the woman I had become. I had arranged the meeting meticulously, though I let it seem casual on the surface. When Mark and a few former colleagues stepped into my office, I could see the faint flicker of surprise in their eyes. They expected a modest, slightly frazzled freelancer, someone who might still be struggling to make rent in a cramped apartment. Instead, they were greeted by a space that radiated accomplishment and taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of the city skyline, sunlight spilling across polished oak floors. Expensive abstract art adorned the walls, each piece carefully chosen, reflecting both elegance and vision. A sleek, leather chair sat behind a massive, glass-topped desk, where I stood waiting, calm and poised. Subtle personal touches, my grandmother's silver bracelet glinting on my wrist, a small bouquet of fresh flowers, awards tucked discreetly on a shelf, spoke volumes without me uttering a word. They wandered through the office slowly, taking in the modern lighting, the neatly stacked folders, the digital awards displayed on the sleek screens. Their silence was heavy with disbelief. I let it hang, savoring the moment just long enough for the tension to settle in. "Wow," Mark finally muttered, glancing at the city beyond my window. I didn't expect this." I smiled, the curve of my lips gentle but full of quiet authority. "You didn't expect me to succeed?" I asked, letting the question linger before continuing. "Or you didn't expect me to thrive while you mocked my abilities?" He swallowed hard, and I could see the recognition dawning, embarrassment, guilt, the weight of their own underestimation settling like dust in the air. I didn't realize," one of the others stammered, eyes darting nervously around the room. I walked slowly to my desk, the soft click of my heels punctuating each step. Pulling out a sleek portfolio, I opened it to reveal project after project, contracts, testimonials, and campaigns that had generated millions in revenue. The evidence of my skills was undeniable. "I am not the struggling freelancer you assumed," I said, my voice steady, calm, and firm. "I am the CEO of my own firm. These projects, these clients, they trusted me and I delivered. Not because I needed your approval, but because I believed in myself when no one else did." Their jaws tightened, faces pale, a mixture of shame and awe flickering across them. Mark shifted uneasily, clearly wrestling with the realization that the girl he dismissed was not only thriving but leading, shaping, and transforming industries in ways he couldn't have imagined. I let them absorb the full weight of it, The quiet power, the self-made success, the transformation from doubt to undeniable authority. I didn't need to raise my voice or gloat. The evidence spoke for itself. Their past mockery, their underestimation, now collided with the undeniable reality. I had not only proven them wrong, I had exceeded their imagination. When the room fell silent, I smiled, small but unyielding. "And now," I said softly, "we can talk about what comes next if you're ready to listen and if you're willing to learn." I could see the hesitation in their eyes, the subtle shift from smugness to uncertainty. For the first time, I held the power in this room, and I intended to use it wisely. This wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity, boundaries, and growth. "I'll help," I said, letting my voice carry calm authority. "But under certain conditions. You all need to understand that respect and effort are non-negotiable." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. First, I turned to Mark, whose pride had once seemed impenetrable. "You mocked my ideas, dismissed my potential, and assumed I wouldn't succeed. If you want to collaborate moving forward, you must acknowledge your mistakes, not just with words, but with action. Take responsibility and commit to learning instead of judging. Humility is the first step to growth." The others shifted uncomfortably, and I addressed them too. "For everyone here, old patterns of dismissiveness stop today. I will guide, mentor, and support, but only if you are willing to change. You must drop toxic habits, focus on building skills instead of tearing others down, and pursue your own goals with integrity. If you can't do that, I will not waste my energy." I could feel the tension in the room crackling, a mix of fear, respect, and reluctant admiration. This was unfamiliar territory for them. Being held accountable, facing someone they had underestimated, and realizing that their actions had consequences. I walked toward the window, letting the light highlight my expression. I care about growth. I care about potential. But I also know my worth. I will not bend to old patterns of disrespect or negativity. If you follow these conditions, you can learn from me, work with me, and even thrive. But it requires commitment, humility, and effort. There was silence, heavy but productive. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice low but sincere. "I understand, and I want to do this right. I've realized I underestimated you, and I'm willing to learn." A few others nodded, eyes downcast but attentive. I could see the beginnings of transformation, the subtle shift from arrogance to curiosity, from judgment to openness. I smiled, a mix of warmth and authority. "This is how it works," I said. "I guide, you learn. You respect the process, and you respect yourselves. And when you succeed, you'll understand why I insisted on these conditions. Growth is not just about skill, it's about character. That's the lesson you all needed, and it starts now." For the first time, the room felt like a space of potential, not judgment. I had turned the tables not with anger, but with structure, compassion, and unyielding confidence. The power shift was complete. I wasn't just a survivor of mockery. I was a mentor, a leader, and a woman who had reclaimed her space with grace and authority. Weeks passed after that meeting, and change began to ripple through the people who once doubted me. Mark showed up to projects with a newfound respect, his questions thoughtful, his critiques constructive. The others followed suit, shedding old habits of judgment and mockery. It was subtle at first, a shift in tone, a willingness to listen, but it was real, tangible proof that my conditions had worked. I watched them grow, guiding them with patience, sharing knowledge, and offering encouragement when it was deserved. The irony wasn't lost on me. Those who once laughed at my ideas were now learning from me, seeking my insight, and slowly embracing the lessons they had ignored for so long. And through it all, I never allowed resentment to cloud the process. My focus was on growth, not revenge. One evening, I sat in my office, the city lights flickering like stars beneath me. I traced the smooth curve of my grandmother's silver bracelet on my wrist, remembering the words that had first sparked my journey. "Your hands are capable of building more than they can imagine." That bracelet, once a symbol of encouragement, now felt like a medal of all I had accomplished, the struggles endured, the skills honed, the respect earned. I reflected on the path that had led me here, the ridicule, the doubt, the sleepless nights, and the relentless self-belief. I realized that every challenge, every dismissal, had been a stepping stone to the woman I had become. Strength wasn't born in comfort. It was forged in persistence, in quiet resilience, and in the courage to claim my space unapologetically. And as I looked out at the skyline, I felt a profound sense of closure and clarity. I had faced the past, transformed the present, and set the stage for the future, not just for myself, but for those who are willing to grow alongside me. I smiled softly, letting the city hum beneath me, and whispered to no one in particular. They thought they could define me, but I built my world instead. And now I teach them how to rise.